Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about dog body language and a couple of the things that I look for um, in a very simple way. We can get really lost, I think, when we're discussing dog body language when we focus on just one thing. So often people say, tail. Often people say ears. People say eyes. Say mouth, right? Um, and so uh, I like to look at this as a whole first, and I think that's the easiest way to do it. And then we can break down each one. So as far as just a basic read on body language, usually my first inclination when I'm watching dogs and their body language is going to be about weight distribution. Okay. Do I see the dog is basically is the chest or is the elbow out ahead of the paw? Okay. And that's one of the big things. That's one of the big things that I'm looking for in this process is that a straight line down, which I would consider neutral. This is a dog that just like a person just standing there. They're not forward, they're not backward, they're just neutral. Okay. And so for me, if that line just goes straight down, that's fine. We don't see the dog shifting forward or backward. Okay, neutral is just normal stance. Okay. Now, in terms of forward or rearward, right? If I see a dog that's rearward, we would see more of something like this, okay? But where everything in the dog is moving away from the perceived thing, maybe another dog, a person, okay? And this is typically, uh, basically, it's just suggesting that the dog is preparing for flight, right? Now, that doesn't mean that the dog won't move forward and bite, but the dog really wants out of the situation, or they're unsure, they're hesitant, concerned, any one of those things. So when I see that weight distribution, that now the elbow is behind the foot, right, versus above it, or versus, once again, that it's more forward than it, this is a dog that's thinking about retreat, okay? And usually I'm going to associate that with fear or a lack of confidence. Whereas in neutral, once again, straight line. And once again, we have to look at the conformation of the dog. A forward dog, right? And I'm just drawing these really quickly. Oh my gosh, that was horrible, right? But a forward dog, right? This is going to suggest aggression, okay? Or a dog that's ready to come forward and deal with that threat, that stimulus. Okay, so when I'm looking at body language, I'm really looking more often than not. If I'm not restraining through the leash, and this assumes that there's no pressure on the leash, and that's important, that is the dog more pointing forward, rearward, or is it neutral? Okay, and so that's the first thing that I'm going to look at because that's going to tell me the most about the state of the dog and what they're considering. Okay, so that's the first thing we want to look at. The next thing in body language that I'm going to go down the line and look at, and once again, this is all kind of interrelated, right? So with dogs, am I seeing forward ears, kind of relaxed ears, right? And for some dogs, that's hard to see, but typically his ears would be very forward. The eyes are forward, okay? And then is the rest of the body forward? Typically, if we're going to see the eyes forward and the ears forward, we're typically going to also see a tail that's kind of upright and forward, okay? Not always the case, but in general, that's what we want to assume. And this is a dog that's preparing to go on offense, okay, or move forward to address whatever that stimulus is. Okay, so that's another dog. I can see that happen from across the yard. Okay, they could be looking at a dog or a person or whatever, way down the way and already be showing this body language. Okay, so is the tail upright? This is going to suggest confidence, maybe defense, right? And what I would say is more confident defense. Okay, that's not always the case, but in general, okay, this is a dog preparing to move forward. All right, and that's something that I want to really keep in mind. Once again, if I see these ears back, once again, the eyes are maybe pointed away from the thing or not looking directly at it, right? These are, once again, typically we're going to see this with more of a tucked tail or kind of a straight back tail. Sometimes it'll be up, but more often we're going to see that. And we also may see hackles, and sometimes we're going to see hackles here. And hackles are just that piloerection of hair. It kind of stands up on end. Okay, that's going to be another body language cue. But once again, it's so much easier instead of focusing on this and this or this and this and this, starting with, is the dog weight distribution, is everything in it pointing forwards, rearwards, or neutral? And I think that's really probably for people out in day camp going to be the easiest thing for us to be able to establish what's the intent of the dog. Okay, so for me, obviously, we want to think a couple of things with the tail, right? To me, this would be more aggressive, depending on the dog, right? If the dog's a husky and has a curled tail, or if the tail's position is just upright, this could just be confident, right? Or it could just be the carriage of the tail. But if we were imagining like a lab or a dog like Ori back there, or a shepherd, right? This is going to be alert more often, okay? With alert can come forward behavior, could be offense, okay? Can be defense, and when we say defense, typically we'll see that tail up. Something else will be kind of backing up in the dog quite frequently. But if a dog's very confident in defense, it thinks it can take you on, and it's just kind of like, you don't want to approach this. It's puffing up, right? It's trying to look big, so that tail's upwards, okay? This could be a happy dog, don't get me wrong. Just depends on the way we're wagging, okay? This, obviously we see the pointers that are going to have different tail carriages and stuff like that. This is straight back, typically. This can be kind of an in-between one. I'm not going to super focus on that, but a resting tail, right? Or a tail that's just kind of casually resting. This is typically going to be calmer, right? This is going to be a dog that's maybe thinking through a puzzle, trying to figure something out. Isn't like, they're going to be more in the neutral territory, right? So this I'm going to think neutral, this I'm going to think forward and alert, okay? And then rearward, we're going to see the tucked tail. Now the speed of the tail movement, right? So if I have a tail that's really tight, meaning it's here and here on the wag, and really the tail could come over here, but it's not. It just, okay, I consider that raw energy, and I consider that arousal. So when I see an upright tail like that that's just really, really, really fast, typically that's going to be pure energy and arousal, and this could actually be a dog that's going on offense. Okay, so that wagging tail is a tail that I am quite thoughtful about. Okay, and I have to know the demeanor of the dog. As I said, when we break down each individual one, it's a little tougher to know because we have to look at everything else on the dog. Okay, whereas if I have a more sweeping wag, sometimes a helicopter, right? More casual sweep kind of motion, like, a rocking chair or something. This is usually, and it's usually not straight up, but sometimes it is. This is going to be what I would consider more of a friendly, welcoming wag. Okay, not always the case. As I said, this can be deceptive, but I want to see a wider range of movement for our happy wags. There are going to be some dogs that just have, once again, we have to see the dog as it is, as the individual. So some dogs are just going to have tighter wags, right? boxers, it's going to be hard to see. With boxers, like their whole butt wiggles, right? And so it's really, really obvious, right? It's like, oh, right? And so we can see that in them, what the intent is pretty quickly, right? For me, obviously, a low wagging tail or a curved tail can be more of a submissive, maybe preparing to flight. Flight. Might be preparing to aggress if it need be, if pressed. Usually this is once again going to be a little tighter, a little less motion. So it'll be like, and this is a dog that's just unsure, right? So once again, I like to think of this once again, forward, kind of neutral, friendly, okay? And this is going to be fit into that rearward category more often than not. Okay, so I'm always looking at those factors. As I said, with eyes, a dog that's giving you direct eye contact, this is forward, right? If I have a dog that's kind of like looking at me, right, but not, we call this whale eye, right? Because it's like you can see the whites of their eyes, and they're kind of like they see you, but they won't like look directly at you. This is a dog that may be like in a difficult position. This would often be associated with like resource guarding, right? The dog's in a hard spot, and they don't want to take their eyes off of you, but they either don't want to take their eyes off the bone, right? So they can see you, they can see this, or they don't want to like pick the fight, but they're preparing for it, right? So this is a bad thing to see, will I? Okay. So we want to kind of keep that in mind. Sometimes that can be more submissive, things when we think of submission, dogs that are really overly submissive, are going to give us like the closed eyes. They almost look like they're hanging out with Cheech and Chong or something, right? And we might even see tight lips. Okay, this is often submission. And it can be even in a friendly scenario, like the dog is a friendly submissive, right? Or we might, and once again, in conjunction, we think pointy ears, right? The ears might be back. This is also a dog that may be very, very stressed, okay? Right, so it's almost like a grimace, right? So those are some of the body language cues that I really like to watch for. Obviously, mouth. Typically, we think, aside from elements of heat, open panting mouth, I'm going to think of as like happy, right? Okay, I know that's a horrible picture there. Open panting mouth, I think, is like happy, not super concerned. Heavy panting, where we see like tightness in the lips and maybe a furrow of the brow, that changes it. That's going to be a dog that's like probably a little bit over threshold, a little bit stressed, maybe on the edge of shutdown, or just incredibly avoidant. Okay, so we really want to look at that. Or is there tightness in there? Is there like that kind of look? Like if I'm like, that's one thing. If I'm like, right, right, that's going to be stress. Okay, and then just the same if not to be weird, but like that right there, we see some furrow brow. That could also be stress. Okay, so those are things that we want to just learn to recognize when we think of the dog. A dog, once again, if it goes from that to we have kind of this really tight mouth, it's closed, the dog, right? That's something where I know that dog is going to be on the upper edges of stress as well. Okay, so just keep in mind, how tight is this face? Does it feel like it's being drawn backwards, right, rearward? Okay. Like I said, I really like to say forward, rearward, and neutral for those reasons, because you're going to hear that kind of like overarching theme with the entire dog's body language, right? There are some other things like head height, right? When we see dogs that are jostling to kind of figure out who's more dominant, right? We're testing each other out, especially in terms of like, you know, in terms of reproduction. We'll see the males do this with the females a lot, kind of come over top. This might be a dog preparing to mount. And it's kind of like testing the waters. So it's like putting its head over the dog's shoulders, right? Kind of squaring up, right? And this is usually, once again, in most cases, going to fall into like arousal, reproduction, or assessment of, their role, whether they're, going to take a more dominant stance or a less dominant stance with the other dog. So this is kind of a negotiating standpoint, and this can go really wrong. Or if you know the dogs, sometimes I might let it go. Okay. So those are some of the basics of body language that I'm going to cover today. I hope that's helpful. We'll get some videos and some pictures of some dogs that go along with this video for staff. But this, for me, is our basic foundation that I'm going to look at, okay? And once again, we'll analyze some more real-life images. But I think just being able to see how these things come together. So remember, got forward, rearward, neutral, and that's going to be weight distribution, okay, mouth, head, eyes, tail, right, and ears. And that's really, it's probably hard to read, but once again, I'll read through those: weight distribution, mouth, head, eyes, tail, ears. Those are the big ones, okay? So I always think of it front, rearward, neutral. Okay, neutral is just the dog that, if we were to think how this applies to us and how we approach dogs, right? So we'll show from the front and then we'll show from the side. Okay, so right now I'm in a pretty neutral stance. I'm not forward or backward, right? Forward. This is aggression, most likely. If I'm like, hey, you, right? So I'm taking space, I'm claiming space, I'm pushing you away through body language, okay? Rearward, right? I'm retreating, or I can be welcoming, right? I'm making myself small, I'm making myself move away. So once again, neutral from the side, aggressive forward, claiming space, distance increasing signal, right? Distance decreasing signal, fear, flight, run away, welcoming, and neutral, okay? And all these matter when I'm dealing with any one of these dogs. If I have a forward dog and I go rearward, that dog is probably going to come at me and come moving towards me, right? They've already claimed the offense, and I'm like, retreat, right? Why we don't run from aggressive dogs, if we can avoid it at all. Okay, rearward. If I'm rearward, this might make a shy dog feel more confident, more comfortable approaching me. In that case, if the dog's neutral, it might just invite the dog into my space. Forward, I'm saying I'm claiming the space, get out of my bubble, don't jump on me, don't come running through the door. And neutral is kind of like, okay, yeah, good. So if I'm forward and the dog backs off, I might go neutral, right? If I have a dog that's a little bit nervous on approaching me, I might shift my body weight away from the dog a little bit. So really think about what you're doing with your body. Your body communicates way more than your words, and the dogs are communicating through body as well, okay?